Well, g'day everybody. It's Benjamin Morgan, Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and welcome to this Tuesday, 7th of February, 7 p.m. broadcast of AOPA Live. This evening, we've got a great program put together and some great panelists to join us, covering a fairly wide array of topics, and we're going to do our very best to try and keep this program limited to exactly 1 hour. Clinton, who'll be joining us a little bit later, has got a running bet saying I probably can't do it, but I'm going to do my very best tonight. Before we kick right off into the program, and my first guest is going to be Paul Rushton, who is one of our new AOPA Australia directors and, in fact, our new treasurer, looking after the finances and the health of the association. I just want to delve a little bit further into the adventure that I had across at CX 2023. Now, I mentioned in the short video that I prepared earlier today that during the end of the year and the start of the new year, I went across to the United States to attend the Cirrus Aircraft CX 2023 conference convention, and it was a coming together of all of the Cirrus partners from around the world, that is maintenance, repair organisations, flight training organisations, all of the partners that have helped and are helping Cirrus create a global success for that brand. And it was an amazing conference, and I had an opportunity to meet some incredible international ambassadors for general aviation. And one of them notably was the former head of the FAA, Steve Dixon. Now, Steve Dixon is former Delta Airlines, one stage in his career responsible for looking after 43,000 staff in that company, and I believe also onward to the FAA, where he was dealing with over 500,000 pilots across the United States. And as I'm often quoted as saying at Senate estimates and other presentations, the US aviation economy is the world's most sophisticated, advanced, and most successful aviation economy. And it's also been a world leader in aviation reforms, especially in the general aviation sector. And I absolutely love the presentation that Steve gave at the Cirrus CX conference, because he spoke directly of the impacts of reform on the general aviation economy in the US, and notably the success of Cirrus as a brand being able to take advantage of advanced technologies and materials, manufacturing processes, bringing all of that together into an incredibly successful product that is now dominating in the general aviation economy. Now, Steve spoke about those reforms and made very, very clear to everybody in attendance, I think there was some 1,000 people in the room, that those achievements would not have been possible without those key reforms. And he went on to make a very clear statement, and that was that he believed that regulators around the world external to the United States were now some 10 to 15 years behind the United States, and they ran the risk that if they did not get on with reforming their systems, they were going to miss out on participating in the new modern aviation economy. And that includes this burgeoning and exploding market of drones and autonomous vehicles, and of course, high technology aircraft manufacturing, design and certification. And so it was something that really resonated with me, and I felt it was really important that I try and corner Steve at the conference, and that's exactly what I did. After he spoke, I raced to the front of the room and I bailed him up and said, I need to bring you to Australia. I need you to come out here to the land down under and to organise a conference where we can have you speak before not only key partners and key people within the aviation industry, but key politicians and representatives of the Department of Infrastructure and CASA, where he would be able to communicate the lessons that the FAA have learned and that their industry are now taking such great advantage of. So I'm going to be working closely with the AOPA board and some external partners. I've already been communicating with Sport Aircraft Association and the AMR-OBA. We'll be reaching out to a lot of the other industry bodies and aiming to try and kickstart General Aviation Summit 2023 and bringing these key leaders out so that we can have this conversation, because there are some really important lessons we can learn from those that have actually been at the helm with their hands on the controls, as I say, of the world's most advanced, sophisticated and successful aviation economy. So a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to go across to the United States. I do have to extend a huge thank you, a personal thank you to Mark de Stoop and the team at Falcon Air, who sponsored all of the costs in sending me across to the United States to take part in that conference and those meetings. It's been a wonderful experience. We couldn't have done it without you. And so I really do thank everybody at the Falcon Air team for that benefit. So thank you so much. Okay, well, we're going to be diving right into the program. I've promised Clinton I'm going to keep it to an hour. My next guest came to the association as a pilot and an aviator who was seeking assistance through AOPA. Paul is a CPA based down in Victoria, a very successful accounting firm, probably one of the most outrageously fun characters I've got to meet in aviation in the past year and a half. Paul How about maybe we dive straight into it? Give us an overview of your background, how you came to be with AOPA, and what's really motivating you to get involved and help, as you say, I'm going to coin your phrase, supercharge this association and get it rocking and rolling.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ben. So I guess my background, I've been an accountant for 32 years, I guess. And so I've acted for clients all over Australia. So ranging from the small mums and dads up to sort of reasonably sized businesses. So I've been consulting ago. A client of mine actually a friend of mine at the time, Andrew Grace, he had Kimberley Aviation, and I went for a fly with him up in the Kimberleys. Had an office in Broome many years ago, and so he then became a friend and a client, and so of course we kept talking aviation. He said, "Go and get your license," and so I blame Andrew for being starting my aviation addiction. So I started with RA Oz with old mate Orb Coote back in Barwon Heads, and then not long after that I got onto Barry Diamond, and we did some flight training in GA, and as I say, the rest is history. So I've been flying ever since. And yeah, so I joined AOPA recently after Ben's great help with some issues I had with CASA, which all got resolved. And yes, I can't speak highly enough of AOPA, and certainly Ben and his assistance and help was unbelievable.
And Paul, you really did have quite a peculiar issue, and you know, it was one of those examples where working together with our member and the association, we were able to get through all of the documentation, put together all the information that was needed to be able to reach out to the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. And I have to say, we do thank Kate Manderson and her team, the PMO of CASA, for organising a direct meeting that we were able to go and sit with them and to work through those issues. And of course, in the end, a successful outcome, an outcome that got you back into aviation, got you back into the cockpit, so to speak, and flying.
Yeah, look, I guess there's two ways you could look at it. We had a sort of protracted issue for actually years, as it happens, and so in the end, I actually reached out to Pip, and look, I can't speak highly enough of Pip, and she engaged. She got me onto Kate, and that's when I did you, Ben, and you then drove down personally from Queensland. We met in Canberra and had a bite to eat the night before, and hung out that night, and went over to CASA House in the morning, and you know, Tony was there, and then subsequently one of the new solicitors was Greg. And so, yeah, look, I've had plenty of stories, act for lots of clients who are in aviation, whether they be pilots or, you know, run various aviation businesses. And, you know, you hear all sorts of stories, and, you know, perhaps in the past. And look, that's the way it is. But look, in terms of the way Pip engaged me, she was fantastic, and Kate was fantastic. And so I guess there's always two sides to every story. And, you know, I regard them as quality people, and they could have fobbed me off. They didn't. We engaged with them, and it turned out a really good result. And I've been flying now for the last 8 months, and everyone's happy. I'm now using my plane back to the aviation community, and I think it's a win-win.
Well, look, that's what it's all about. It's about keeping you in the air, as our mission statement is all about, your freedom to fly. And of course, coming off the back of all of that, we had a conversation, Paul, about getting you involved in AOPA and joining the board as a director, and putting your skills as a flying accountant to task. Could you tell me a little bit about where we're at right now, and obviously your vision and your plan for supercharging the association?
Yeah, well, I guess I've sort of come to CASA with the business background, and sorry, not CASA. I've come to AOPA, I should say, and I haven't gone to the dark side, Ben. Don't worry. I've come to AOPA, you know, with a business background, and I guess I'm looking at it through the eyes of, you know, as a CPA and an accountant, and you know, so I think there's lots of room for improvement. We've had COVID, which has you know, been challenging, and I think we've at the point now we've really got to turn the show around, and we need the support of all our members and actually all the pilots out there and everyone else involved in aviation, because I can absolutely attest to the good work, to information that I wasn't otherwise privy to. And I can just encourage everyone to get on board, because what you do and what the board does and what we all do for everyone in aviation, I think is profound. And I encourage anyone. So in the end, it's about the money. We've got to make sure we have the money to support. We got to have the money to have a financial platform to enable your work. And I'm not going to talk what we've spoken about in the last couple of weeks, and I'll leave that to you, Ben. But I know there's some things in the pipework, some pretty exciting things about to break, and I'll let you talk that in due course. But all those sorts of things are contingent upon us having a really strong balance sheet. That's what I'm focused on, is getting the membership back through the door, getting the dollars in the bank, and supporting members, giving them value for, and let them know what we do for them too.
Well, look, we've certainly not hidden it. I mean, we went through COVID. We made a decision as a board that we were not going to harass and hound people for money during probably what was the most difficult period in Australian aviation. I can't remember a time in my 43 years where our aviation industry endured anything like what we've been through in the last 2.5, 3 years. So we made a choice. We basically put the organisation into a semi-state of hibernation, but keep working. Everybody took a licking, so to speak, and I can attest. I did it as tough as many of our members were doing it. I shared in that pain, but I believed, and I know the board has believed in our organisation, and we continue to believe. And I'm excited about it. We've got a fantastic membership renewal strategy and promotion sitting in the works right now, and hopefully the board will be signed off with that tomorrow, and I'll be able to release information on it. But it's going to be absolutely epic. I'll probably leak a few details. Wouldn't it be awesome if you won a brand new Cirrus aircraft by being an AOPA member? I mean, could you imagine winning a brand spanking new Cirrus aircraft just for being an AOPA Australia member? Imagine a promotion like that. But I won't give anything away. I'll wait until the board has signed it off.
Morgan doesn't win. Otherwise, there might be some questions, Ben.
That's exactly right. But mate, I'd be over the moon if we had an AOPA member winning a brand new Cirrus aircraft. And what a way to support the association! Renewing your membership, getting back involved, taking out a new membership, joining a new friend, maybe the Aero Club joining, an airport joining, sharing in this excitement to get our general aviation industry going. And after all, that's what AOPA is all about. It's about creating a conversation. It's about starting the discussion, good, bad, or indifferent, getting a conversation and a discussion going over how do we move aviation forward? Is it the best possible way? Is there a better way? Are there other things we can be doing to enhance and, to quote you, supercharge general aviation? So exciting time. Paul, thank you so much for joining us and giving up a little bit of time this evening for people to see you and to get to know you. I really do appreciate it. I think we've had a little bit of difficulty with your internet connection tonight, but it's great to see you taking part in these. I know you and I have already had a host of conversations around topics we can be talking about with members. I'm going to be very much looking forward to bringing you back to the desk. And so on behalf of our national membership and to all of our supporters, I thank you very much for joining the board, supporting the association, and just, mate, really looking forward to working with you over this next 12 months run.
Cheers, Ben. Likewise.
Okay, well, that was Paul Rushton. He is the new treasurer of AOPA Australia, director of the board, and he's a really exciting guy. And I can tell you, he is just an absolute dynamo. If you want to talk about excitement plus, people say I could talk a submarine out of the water. I reckon he could talk ice into melting. He is just absolutely a cracking guy. So I look forward to catching up with him again soon. Now, I would like to introduce a really good friend of mine to the broadcast this evening. This is her first time joining me on a live broadcast, and it's none other than Angela Garvey, who I am excited to be able to tell everybody. Angela, you're the new manager of Armidale Regional Airport.
I am. It's so exciting. I love it. It's great.
Well, I think it's exciting because how wonderful to see AOPA Australia members out amongst the aviation industry in key in jobs that are key areas of responsibility for general aviation, and airports are probably the most important part of our general aviation community and industry, and we need to build great relationships with airports and great strategies with airports. And so I'm absolutely enthused that at Armidale Airport we now have somebody who understands general aviation and gets what it's all about. This is exciting.
It is exciting, and it's already proven to be quite successful. Just even stakeholder engagement with the people who are already on the airfield, like Super Air and Fleet Helicopters and Edwards Aviation and Everett Aviation. So it's wonderful. We're building great relationships. We're looking at negotiating already 2 flying schools to start up at Armidale, because there hasn't been a flying school at Armidale in years. So it's really,
Angela,
really exciting times.
I think everybody needs to know as well, you're a pilot as well. You're not only an airport manager, you're a pilot, you're an aerobatics pilot, and you're also running a business in aviation that you've got off the ground, which has a really incredible and personal meaning to me, something that I've recently been through. And I have to say, thank you so much off the back of that whole experience. You know, I received a number of telephone calls through that period, but it was wonderful just to get a phone call from you to say, hey, Ben, you know, what's going on is really, it's quite, you know, quite impactful. Are you okay? You know, do you want to talk about this? And so, Angela, would you like to talk a little bit about navigating aviation as the business? Talk a little bit about what this is all about and what you've got going here.
Yeah, well, I reached out, Ben, because I know what it's like to kind of, you know, lead everyone and make sure that everyone else is okay. But, you know, sometimes we need to reach out to you and make sure you're okay as well. So my business, or it's a service really, it's called Navigating Aviation. And many years ago, I used to own a skydiving business with my partner, former partner. And in 2006, we had a terrible fatal accident, which involved 5 people dying and 2 people surviving. And for many, many years, there was just no one in general aviation. As you know, we're not big organizations. There's no employee assistance programs. There was no one to reach out to and talk to. And even though we're a small community, when you're struggling, the last thing you want to do is to sort of rely on your friends, because you sort of think, oh, I don't want to be a pain and all the rest of it. So life becomes a real struggle and quite traumatic. And so it took many, 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 many years for me to unpack all of that. And I just had this realization that, oh my gosh, I've got all of these skills. I'm a pilot. I've owned a general aviation business. I've got amazing contacts in the industry. I've got all the knowledge about rules and regulations. I went out and did a counselling course and started a counselling and support service for specifically general aviation, but all of aviation. So that anyone can speak to somebody who really truly understands the industry.
Well, look, you know, until you've walked through that process, you really don't understand, and you don't necessarily appreciate the stress, the pressure, the emotional aspects of it. And having recently been through it again, and this is probably one of the sides of one of the aspects of the AOPA job that I really was never quite prepared for, and that is, in this work, you're going to get to know a lot of people, and there's going to be those that unfortunately are going to lose their lives in aviation accidents, and there's been too many. The last one was just so close to home, and so yeah, it's just such a wonderful thing that you put together, and I know, having walked through that process, it's not just those that are directly involved in the accident. There's a lot of friends and there's a lot of external people around accidents. So this is a topic that we're definitely going to have some more conversation around, and I'd like to bring more awareness throughout the industry in relation to the fact that there are resources available. I myself, through David Jardine's accident, which happened recently, right throughout the process of that accident, I wrote a diary notes down, and I've compiled loosely what I've called the anatomy of an accident, and it goes through and it outlines the events and the learnings that you would never have thought about that you're going to encounter in that process. And it really dawned on me the last time around that none of us in the aviation industry are really that prepared. We train to be great pilots, we train to be great navigators, we train to be great aerobatic people. We learn all these things about aircraft systems. We don't necessarily learn about an action plan for what happens in this situation. What does a family do? Who does the family reach out to? And it's one of the things that I'm immensely proud of, is the work that AOPA did with David's family, in being there for the family, making sure that we helped handle media inquiries, to keep the pressure away from David's family and those people. And I've done this with other families, and I've been building skills in doing it, but I didn't realise just what it was, how much I was taking on in the same context. So Angela, a wonderful business, one that I'm behind 1,000%, and one that AOPA will be behind as well. And we're looking forward to having more conversation around it. So thank you so much, and thank you for joining us this evening. I just wanted to bring you in very quickly because I'm really excited that you've got this job over at Armidale. Armidale has such an enormous general aviation opportunity in its location. And, I'm just going to I can't wait. We're going to find some aviation businesses that you can get rocking and rolling there. And if we can create a standout relationship with Armidale and show that this is how GA can really fire on all 12 cylinders, then hopefully other airports can take lead from that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And we've got an airside business park, and we've now got a 24-hour fuel farm. So come on along.
Okay, well, there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, Angela Garvey, manager for Armidale Regional Airport and navigating aviation, and a great friend to so many across the general aviation industry. It's been wonderful to watch your journey online as well through social media. Keep it up, Angela. We'll be having you back on in the weeks to come as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay, well, that was Angela Garvey. We're definitely going to be dragging her back to the table and the panel in the weeks to come and learning more about her business. Next up, straight into the hot seat, is none other than Clinton McKenzie. Clinton is one of our directors at AOPA Australia. He's a legal mind, and he is an analytical thinker when it comes to many of these issues. And I have to say, Clinton, it's been such a pleasure to be working with you over the last few months that you've been part of the AOPA board. And in the background, you've been working on some really interesting background research, which has included submitting and processing FOIs or in relation to CASA issues, and also in relation to some of these airports issues through the Department of Infrastructure. So I'll hand over to you to give a bit of an explanation.
Yeah, I mean, the FOI requests to CASA relate to AVMED issues, and we can probably dedicate a different session to that and the AVMED issues. The other FOI requests have gone into the Department of Defence and the Department of Transport, whatever it is at the moment, because I'm interested in working out how airport plans get approved such that they result in the degradation or destruction of aviation infrastructure. And again, being a legal wonk, I go back to first principles, and the Airport Act says, in deciding whether to approve an airport plan, the management plan, I'll call it, the minister must have regard to the following matters. And paragraph A is the extent to which carrying out the plan would meet present and future requirements of civil aviation users of the airport, blah, blah, blah. So I'm fascinated to try and find out how it is that the minister becomes aware of the present and future requirements of civil aviation users of the airport, noting that civil aviation goes way beyond the airlines, such that can be taken into that regard can be had to that in accordance with the law before approving the plan. So I've gone to the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, blah, 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 to get FOI, to get access to documents about the approval of the most recent plan. I might have to do a bit of digging, which in effect, or the variation to it, which resulted in the shortening of or the displacement of the threshold to runway 12. And as we know at other airports, have literally resulted in the bulldozing of runways and the destruction of hangars and all of that sort of stuff. And coincidentally, I had to pick someone up at the Canberra airport a couple of months ago. And while I was there was a big bit of machinery crushing and destroying the hangar in which my Bonanza used to be parked, and for which I paid $15,000 a year to Canberra Airport to park my aircraft on a bit of land owned by the Commonwealth in a hangar that wasn't built by the airport. So that's still in train, and I should acknowledge the professionalism of the FOI officers that I've been dealing with in the different organisations, because they've been very effective and professional, and I wouldn't expect anything different. So that one's still in train. But I went to the Department of Defence and asked them for documents containing information that would tell me how much money has been paid by the Commonwealth through the Department of Defence. The Department of Defence is part of the Commonwealth, to the airport operators for the occupation and use of what is now called Defence Establishment Fairburn. It used to be RAF Fairburn. I served there a long time ago at 34 Squadron. How much does the Commonwealth pay to occupy premises that are owned by the Commonwealth and were built by the Commonwealth on behalf of the Commonwealth? And I deliberately excluded any premises that were caused to be constructed by the airport operator, right? So this is Commonwealth stuff. And the answer came back for the 2 years from the 1st of July 2020 to the 30th of June 2022, $28,036,582.63. So 28, let's call that $28 million for 2 years. So $14 million a year, over $1 million a month, the Commonwealth's paying to occupy land and premises that the Commonwealth owns. I also asked about amounts paid by the Commonwealth through Defence for the landing and parking of ADF aircraft. Our boys and girls in blue, of whom I used to be one. Answer for that 2 financial years, $3.8 million, $7,844.77. So that adds up to around close enough to $32 million over two years, $16 million per annum, divided up $1.3 million each month. Now, let's assume there's a bit of a previous complication around Canberra Airport, because it used to be called what's a joint user airport, because that was back in the day, it was RAF Fairburn and it was joint military. That's gone. That's why the name's changed to Defence Establishment Fairbairn. My understanding is that the lease is for 50 years with an option option for a further 49 years, 99-year lease. And my understanding is that, and the figures differ, but I've heard a figure of $65 million was paid. 65 million, but let's make it $99 million to make the maths easy. 99 years, $99 million, $1 million a year, or whatever it is that the airport owners have paid. If these numbers out of Defence are indicative, and let's just say this started in the financial year 2020, there's still 75 years to run. And by my math, 75 years by 16 million goes to over 1 billion, with a B, over $1 billion that will be paid.
1.16.
Well, it's
Who's splitting hairs?
a big number that the Commonwealth taxpayer, you and I, and everybody else will be paying for the Defence Force of the nation to use and occupy land owned by the Commonwealth and premises built by the Commonwealth.
But Clinton, we should also stress, and this obviously we've still got plenty of time to put more FOI requests in, but this is just the defence buildings and defence aircraft movements and parking. This number does not include all the other government organisations that are currently leasing facilities at the Madura Business Park and other areas on the airport site. In all likelihood, this could be a situation where there is in excess of $2 billion or more of taxpayer money being put through this privatised airport to house government Commonwealth facilities on an airport the taxpayer owned.
Yeah. Well, the taxpayer owns, it continues to be the legal owner. There's a lessor, a lessee called the airport operator. They have an equitable ownership in the form of a lease, so it's still our land. And I liken it to, can imagine owning a property on a big block of land. You own it, and there's a house and a garage, and you own it, and you lease it to someone for $1 a month, and they lease it back to you, and you're paying $1,000 a month to live in one of the rooms, and $10 a month to put your car in the garage, and then they use vacant parts of the land to build units on, which they rent out, and meanwhile they decide they're going to reduce the size of the garage because it's getting in the way of their development. So you can't use the garage as much as you used to. It is phenomenal, and as you say, the money that the area of land over on that northeastern side where RAF Fairbairn is chicken feed compared to the area of land that's now got the DFOs on it, but also as you say, all of those huge office buildings, many of which have got Commonwealth public servants in it, and so the Commonwealth is paying rent to occupy those buildings. Now, it is true that if the Commonwealth would still have to find space for those people somewhere, but the Commonwealth could have built those blocks and not be paying rent to anybody for them, and so it seems to me to be one big machine that is transferring public wealth into private hands. And
I think I'll jump in, because I think what angers me most with this, and what would anger the vast majority of people across the aviation industry, is that we are continually told by the government, Department of Infrastructure, that they don't have the controls and mechanisms in order to protect access for small general aviation. They don't have the controls in order to ensure that there is an equity of access to small to medium-sized businesses. We've been consistently told by the Commonwealth time and time again, these are privatised airports. We've leased them to them. They have a freedom to do whatever they need to do commercially. We can't interfere with that. It seems to me that in the case of Canberra, the federal government, in fact, has several $1 billion worth of leverage over Canberra Airport, and actually has a great deal of control over Canberra Airport by way of the fact that it's a major customer of the airport. You would think that the taxpayer, for the billions of dollars that this privatised airport is going to receive from the Commonwealth, you would think that Canberra Airport would say, you know what, we'll build some facilities for small to medium-sized general aviation because it's being a good corporate citizen. It's actually looking after the investment that the government's making in us, the taxpayers investing in us, yet none of that's happening. It seems to me that these people are behaving like, we'll take the cream, we'll take the cake, we'll take the pan, we'll take the knife, and damn it, we'll take your cupcakes and your icing with it. We don't give a damn.
Yeah, well, I don't think the Commonwealth has much leverage, because there'll be leases and agreements with all of this written into it. The Air Force has probably got not much option to move out of Fairbairn, for example, and the Commonwealth would then have to move all these people out of these offices. I mean, two things on your point about taking. When I get my annual bill for parking my Bonanza at Canberra Airport, it also came, so 15 grand. Oh, by the way, if you want a parking permit, that's another $110, including GST, you see. But even more, the chutzpah is such that every now and then the airport operators complain that public servants aren't travelling enough. They're complaining publicly. They'll actually complain publicly that the government isn't making public servants travel enough, such that there's a lot of throughput at the airport. So their attitude is, this whole edifice is there for, and the public sector is there simply to make the airport operator rich. And I'm not surprised that they have that attitude, because that's the deal that some genius signed up to. Now, in terms of leverage, as I say, the leverage is supposed to be in the approval or non-approval of the master plan. It is open to the minister, if he or she is properly informed, to see that the destruction of infrastructure or degradation of infrastructure used by general aviation users is not a plan which meets the present and future requirements of civil aviation users. To me, it's not rocket surgery. Now, if the department is advising the minister that you've got no choice but to approve this plan, or this is all good for all civil aviation users, then I'm sorry, but the department is not, in my view, doing its job properly, because the words are clear. And if the department is assuming that the airport operator, through its planning consultation process, is actually ascertaining and concerned about GA users, well, that is just dead wrong. They don't care about GA users. They want us all gone. We're an irritant. So that's why I'm trying to find out from these FOI documents who it is that writes to the minister and says, "Dear Minister, approving this plan will meet the present and future requirements of civil aviation users of this airport." Bankstown, doesn't matter whether it's Canberra, Bankstown, Moorabbin, or whatever it is, someone must be saying to the minister, this is all something that's going to meet the present and future requirements of civil aviation users of the airport. So that's
on this particular issue, Clinton, in that trip I had to the United States, I got to meet representatives of the NBAA, and one of them in particular, I believe, was Alex Gertzen, if I've got the name. I'm sorry, Alex, if I got the surname wrong. He was the director for NBAA, responsible for airports and regulation, and he gave a presentation. And he spoke to the issue of protecting airports across the United States, and he made a very poignant remark, and that was that if the US federal government's airports, grants and funding assurances framework did not exist, you would have seen airports redeveloped across the US for non-aviation use at an uncontrolled rate. Now, what happens in the United States is airports right across the country that access funding from the federal government, the US federal government, are provided funding. However, they have to sign on to what's called the Airports Grants Assurances Framework. And for 15 years from the date they take a grant, there's a whole series of preconditions that they have to adhere to, which include equity of access, building facilities for small to medium-sized aviation, making sure there's going to be parking and access for small to medium-sized aviation. The US foresaw all of this and created a framework which encouraged their airports to, at the large size and the medium and the small size, to all consider that they have to play a role in nurturing and fostering aviation. And it works. And it was such a powerful presentation that he gave, because you could see the direct contrast between the failure of the Australian system to couple the privatised owners into a framework that provided assurances and protection, and the US system, which did. Australia's airports are being redeveloped at an uncontrolled rate into non-aviation. Moorabbin, Bankstown, Jandakot, all these airports are disappearing. And I've sadly, returning to work this week, straight away I've got businesses at Bankstown reaching out to me saying, Ben, have a look at these letters. I've just been hit with a 300% increase in rent after I received a 300% increase in rent on the last rent review, and they're telling me these are market reviews. These airports are behaving in a predatory manner. They are using their market monopoly powers to muscle people out. They're converting the land. I remember saying clearly to the Department of Infrastructure at Bankstown, they are literally trying to drive aviation businesses off so that they can claim there's not enough demand for aviation and then turn it into non-aviation. For years, I was told that was BS. Now, the entire southern side of our airfield has been lost and turned into a non-aviation industrial park, and they're not stopping there. They want to move that further north now and really get into it. So I don't know. I think the Department of Infrastructure has got a lot of work to do, and they need to start taking immediate and direct action and ensuring that there are assurances put in place. Otherwise, we're not going to have an aviation industry at these airports. We're going to have business parks, non-aviation industrial parks, and there's going to be a strip of runway down the centre with the minimum number of hangars that they can get away with having.
Yeah, well, you see, the United States, two things happen. They understand that aeronautical capability, aviation capability, is a fundamental part of their superpower status. And secondly, they understand what it's all built on, where the grassroots come from. And that's general aviation, the little aerodromes, and all that it provides. And I can quote to you, I'll send it through to put on the AOPA Facebook page, a US legal case where the FAA took the local aerodrome operator or whatever to court to stop them doing a development because it cites, and this judge goes through why all of this capability, this aviation, general aviation infrastructure, is fundamental to a whole bunch of other important things. And we just see, Australia just seems to think that, you know, the Yanks will come and save us, they'll sell us aeroplanes, you know, it's all, we'll just sit back and export dirt, and that's all we need to do.
Well, Clinton, I've said this before, I'll say it again. The Department of Infrastructure's role in respect to airports is airports. I've never understood why the Department of Infrastructure seems to almost prioritise the approval and the green lighting of non-aviation developments at airport sites, and yet seems to take no action in encouraging the development of airports for aviation. And that's why at times I've been led to say things like, I think the relationships between some of these key people in the Department of Infrastructure and some of these privatised airport entities needs to be investigated, because it's almost this surreal experience where the very people who are supposedly safeguarding aviation are busily handing it away, telling aviation we're doing our job, but everyone knows the job's not being done, but the developers are winning time and time again. And I just don't understand it. I don't understand how your airports division at infrastructure don't seem to have the same urgency and concern as the industry bodies do, that if we don't do something to safeguard the airports for aviation, we're not going to have an aviation industry. And this is probably a fantastic moment to segue into our next topic, which is going to be the Aviation White Paper. The government seems to be perennially confused as to what is causing the decline in aviation, and we seem to be stuck in Groundhog Day, waking up, hearing an announcement that there's another Senate inquiry, there's another white paper, there's another consultative round, and the government sitting there quite genuinely looking to camera saying, we are very interested in trying to understand what is impacting aviation and what needs to be done. And so airports are just another example of that. We've been saying for 30 years or 25 years since privatisation what this impact is and what needs to be done. And the government's saying, well, hang on, we've got to go back to, you know, jump, as I said today, jump in the DeLorean, get Doc Brown and Marty and Doc Brown, dial in 1988 into the DeLorean and go back in time. You know, it's crazy. So maybe I might start with Paul, because he's been pretty quiet. We lost his connection earlier and he's back. He might have a question or two on it. And then Clinton, let's dive into this aviation white paper.
Yeah, just before the white paper, I had a question for you, Clinton. I've actually, one of the benefits of being on the board probably 4 or 5 months, and is an extraordinary intellect. And I think Clinton's a very, very sound thinker and an extraordinary intellect, and I rate him very highly. And I think your work is outstanding, by the way, Clinton. But just going back to but it's true. But going back to the freedom of information stuff and those numbers that you put up around the airport and what the taxpayers paying back to what we're paying back to the airport. I guess as I was listening to that, and I know that you've sent an email to the board previously about that sort of stuff, but as you're talking before, I was just thinking, well, that's obviously disturbing. So what are your views around what we should do about it? Like, it's obviously...
I think...
what are your views in terms of what we should do?
Thank you for that very positive and gratifying unsolicited comments about me, Paul. You haven't known me for long, so we started a high and it'll deteriorate from here. Well, to the extent that there are long-term leases and arrangements that are binding on the Commonwealth, there's not much we can do about it down that path. The only path that I can see to provide any blight or reversal is the approval or non-approval of airport master plans to reverse this deterioration. And we saw before the last election that the then Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Joyce, who's in the coalition governments, the Deputy Prime Minister usually has a transport portfolio, refused to approve a plan. And that must have sent shockwaves through someone, but that's maybe he looked at it and thought, hang on a sec, I'm having regard to the extent to which carrying out this plan would meet the present future requirements civil aviation users. I don't think it will. So the thumbs down. So the only way that's what in the current paradigm, that's the only mechanism that I see that can be used. Now, in terms of the Department of Infrastructure, I said before, I watched the responsible official before a Senate committee a while ago, and I said she would have made Pollyanna look like a pessimist. She said, "Oh, the airport operators have an incentive to have a positive relationship with the aviation users," and I nearly fell off my chair laughing. They have an incentive to have a positively acrimonious and negative relationship with general aviation users because they want them gone. They're a pest. They're getting in the way of milking the asset for all it's worth. So we've got to get into the department's head and see what's going on in it, if anything.
So the common denominator that gets back to Ben's advocacy in AOPA to make sure we try and possible, which is more reason why we need more members.
Well, we absolutely need a minister to take serious interest in the issue on behalf of the aviation industry and not be an advocate for the Airports Association. That's actually what we need. And I'll make the comment again. We need a minister who's responsible for the aviation industry, being an advocate for the aviation industry, not for the property developers and their Airports Association. And until that happens, we're in dire straits because previous ministers have just ticked and flicked these master plans. And as Clinton has rightfully said, what we've seen is master plan after master plan after master plan delivered that just paves the way for more and more non-aviation. And you end up in a situation like we've got at Bankstown. They've just undertaken I've been told it could be anywhere between $2 to $4 million worth of airport beautification works. We've now got lovely new plants. We have lovely new signs. We've renamed the airport. We're no longer called Bankstown Airport. We're called Area. We've even removed the word airport from the name of the operation because we don't want people to know we've got an airport problem. We're an area, and we're a multifaceted area of non-aviation industrial opportunity and real estate opportunities. And we've spent, apparently the airport operator has ploughed $2 to $4 million into beautification works. All the while, you can't get a hangar door fixed. You can't get critical infrastructure fixed up. We've got taxiways that are left damaged. We've got infrastructure that is in a state of derelict disarray. Yet we've got lovely new signs and we have new pathways and we have new plants around their new corporate headquarters. And of course, those new corporate headquarters, is there a coincidence that we've just built this brand new northern non-aviation industrial estate along the top of our airport? We've lost all that airport land. It's been turned into commercial industrial warehouses, and the new corporate headquarters are located close to that, and all the new parks and beautification are along that. I mean, I think these people treat the industry like we're fools and we don't know what's going on. My argument for infrastructure should be simple. When I met with the head of airports and infrastructure going back 1.5 years ago, I asked her a direct question. When was the last time you got out of Canberra and you came up and you saw with your own eyes what was going on, and you met with aviation tenants and heard what has been going on and how the businesses are being treated? When did you last get on site? And her response was, well, the entire time I've been working for infrastructure, I've not done that because I've been busy. And that is the problem. Infrastructure need to be out at these airports, seeing what is going on. They've got to stop attending Airports Associations conferences. They've got to stop having dinners, lunches and engagements with the privatised airport operators, and they've got to start going and engaging with the aviation businesses, the ones who have to put up with the excessive leases and the conditions and the lack of maintenance and the non-aviation developments encroaching on the safety of our airports. And until that happens, they're going to continue to exist in blind ignorance, which, you know, to bring this back to this white paper, this is where we're back to. We're back to a federal government now saying to the aviation industry, well, we have no idea as to what is going on with aviation. We need to know what the problems are of aviation, and until such time as we know what the problems are, we can't take action. So the Labor Party has come into government. It's announced that its strategy will be to undertake a white paper, and this is not the first time that the white paper fiasco has been thrust on the Australian aviation industry. Anthony Albanese, when he was Minister for Infrastructure, did this exact play. And what this has done is it's served to kick the can down the road until the Labor Party is virtually completed its first term in government without ever having to make a single decision or take a single action to correct anything. And so we've had it released on the 7th of February. The terms of reference have now been announced. $7 million of Australian taxpayer money is now being committed to holding this white paper. And the white paper comes just after we held a General Aviation Senate inquiry, which basically had all of the results in the inquiry, but the Labor Party basically canned the GA inquiry and wants to go back and hit the restart button. So let's have some comment on that. Clinton, your thoughts on what's going to happen with the white paper?
You said Back to the Future. I just say Groundhog Day. I've seen too many of them to come and go with no change in direction or substantive outcomes. Different. So I'll look at it. I'm sure it'll have a nice choice of font and use of white space, but the rest of it will be.
Well, Clinton,
but I do know just one potential solving of the mystery. The beautification program at the Bankstown precinct may be a clever strategy, because I know that recently there was a NOTAM for Sydney, right? And this NOTAM, this is real. This NOTAM says runway distance supplement, RDS, amend the runway 07 approach gradient 3.8% due to shrub, 25 feet AMSL, brackets 4 feet AGL, bearing 268 magnetic, 136 metres from the ARP. So a NOTAM has been put out because the runway distance supplement has been changed to change the approach gradient into an international airport because of a shrub that's 4 feet AGL.
Cut the tree. You know, once upon a time we'd go cut the tree. Now we close the airport. There's a real broken mentality that goes on in this thinking. Back to this white paper, Clinton, if we look at the infrastructure.gov.au website, we go to the white paper, we're presented with 4 key things that the white paper is going to examine. I'm just going to read off each topic, and I'll get both of you just to give me your reflection. The first topic that the Australian government wants to impress upon the aviation industry for this white paper is the following: how to maximise the aviation sector's contribution to achieving net zero carbon emissions, including through sustainable aviation fuels and emerging technologies. I mean, in reflection of how broken our aviation industry is and how backward our regulatory frameworks are, do you really feel that this primary objective of this white paper is in any way befitting of the challenges that actually sit in front of us?
Well, not so far as the revitalising what I call general aviation. I mean, and in terms of general aviation, that's not the main game for that first one anyway. That it's the airlines. So if you want to achieve that outcome, just shut the airlines down. Job done. Happy days. I'll be interested to see what the time and money produces in terms of actual outcomes on that priority.
Any comment from you, Paul?
Well, I had an interesting thing today, Ben. I had from the CPAs. They sent me my practicing certificate on an electronic form, and they no longer send them out. They used to send like a sort of paper version where you put it in a like a what's it called, like a up on the wall, you know, in like a plaque, and you stick it in your office. So they no longer send it because they want to be carbon neutral. And I wrote back to them, you know, very kindly. I said, well, I'm not too sure what is the difference between me printing out one page and you printing out one page, how it's going to add to the net zero business. And I guess when you said that about the net zero emissions with the white paper, I sort of reflected on that, and I thought, well, we're all for net zero, but sometimes a bit of sanity needs to prevail at times, I think. So, yeah.
Okay, the next topic they push out here is that this is point number 2 of the white paper. They say that the white paper needs to address the economic reforms the economic reforms needed to improve productivity across the sector, including addressing skills shortages, competition between airports and airlines, and charting a course out of the pandemic. And I think the key word there is they're specifically using the word the economic reforms. So far, I've not heard in the first 2 points any reference whatsoever to the regulatory settings, policies, or reforms that would help anything. But we're economic. Thoughts on that one, Clinton?
Well, how are they going to give some competition to Canberra Airport? What are they going to do? Do a second Canberra Airport? That's not going to happen. So there's no competition with that airport. In terms of apprentices, I was an aircraft apprentice. The only way to do that is make that career choice much more attractive, and part of the attractiveness, it has to be the regulations under which those people are going to do their job, and recognition of the work that they do and the qualification overseas. And there's not too much of that happening at the moment.
All right. Third point here, and this is where we start to get a little bit closer to the target, how to support and regenerate Australia's general aviation sector. Well, I've got a recommendation. How about we do something really bold, something the industry's been asking for, I don't know, 50 years, and we adopt the US FAA regulations. We stop playing around and stop kidding ourselves. I'm going to quote Dick Smith. At the time Australia built the Nomad, the Americans built the Space Shuttle. That tells you everything you need to know about Australian regulation, right? What do we possibly in this country know about aviation regulation that the Americans don't know? And a great example today, I was researching, President Sean Kelly and I are researching, and we're producing a range of comparisons between the Australian regulatory system and the US regulatory system. And I said to him, Sean, are you up to speed with the sport pilot licensing framework in the US FAA regs? And in the US regulations, you can become a sport pilot. It's effectively the equivalent of becoming an RAOS pilot. But under central regulation, they have a framework for sport pilot. And subpart J covers that. And subpart K of part 61, I think it's part 61.301 through to part 61.403, they cover how to become a sport pilot and then how to become an instructor. As a sport pilot, that is a pilot licensed only with a sport pilot license, you can apply and become an instructor so you can teach other sport pilots. If you want to know why the Australian general aviation industry is so busted, it's because we have broken the cycle and the connective systems within the regulatory environment that allow pilots to come in at a bottom level and to step and work their way up through the system in a organised, efficient, and kind of cost-effective pattern to do it. What we've done in Australia, for whatever reason, I can't explain it, and I spoke about this with Steve Dixon, former head of the FAA. What we've done in Australia is we've privatised and created monopolies of every subcomponent of our 61 licensing framework, and we've created little groups that if you want to become a recreational pilot, instead of just becoming a pilot and going on your journey, I know you've got to go over there and join a private company. And by the way, the aircraft you're going to fly are not really Australian registered aircraft, but we've created an exemption for them so they can be Australian aircraft. And by the way, you can't work on that aircraft, but you can work on that aircraft because we're giving you exemptions, and we've created more exemptions than we've created regulations. We've disjointed the entire system. We've created sector monopolies from one end of the system to the other. So there's no possible way that you can just create one simple, streamlined regulatory environment for aviation to foster and to grow. And until CASA faces the reality that this busted, monopolised system that they've created is not working for the industry, they'll never succeed. They will never succeed in fixing the problems of aviation. Convince me I'm wrong, Clinton.
Well, CASA doesn't see its role. CASA doesn't see its role as being to fix aviation. CASA sees its role as to make us all safe, and that they do pursue with alacrity, and they get There's money tipped into their pockets in lucrative amounts every fortnight, and will continue forevermore doing that until someone decides that it's not working and fixes it. And that's the only way to do it. And I'll just make the point on aircraft and the manufacture of aircraft. You know, all this stuff, well, Australia's too small and blah, 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 blah. Well, you might have heard of the Pilatus aircraft and PC-9s and PC-12s and PC-24s and all that. Very, very popular and respected aircraft around the world. Pilatus. Switzerland's got a population of 9 million people. 9 million people. And they can build and sell around the world cutting-edge aviation technology, flying machines. But it's all too hard for us. And I don't get it.
Well, Clinton, I asked the question directly of Cirrus Aircraft in the United States, and I said to them, could you do what you're currently doing in Australia? And I got laughed at politely. And they just said, Ben, the Australian system is just too complicated, and you don't have the certification reforms necessary for an aircraft manufacturer to be able to design, build, test, and certify in a manner in which it would be cost effective. And it's quite sad, because if you consider the currency advantage between the US and Australia, there's a natural huge advantage there for corporations to look at the Australian marketplace to say, well, if we had a regulatory environment which was a duplication of the US and we could build facilities in Australia and get up and going, Australia could be a very lucrative manufacturing skills and technical trade economy to power those aircraft manufacturers. But we are just we're missing out on it. We are not going to be able to tap into that. Paul?
So, sorry, I've got a question for both of you. 5 minutes ago, posed by one of the viewers that said, where do you see the industry if nothing changes? And I think now it's probably a good time to reflect on that. So what do you think about that, Ben? Where do you see the industry if nothing changes? Which is a question posed a few minutes ago.
Okay, well, I really do fear that nothing is going to change. We were presented some time ago with a GA roadmap by CASA. And I'm going to say this again. I know Pip at times must go, where does Ben sit with me? You know, is he a supporter of mine, or is he trying to throw a torpedo through the office door? I actually have supported Pip for some time. I think she genuinely has wanted to try and move the needle on general aviation. I don't know whether she's surrounded with people who are going to allow her to do that. And I can only base my assessment based on the evidence, the outcomes, the proof, the physical proof. Are we changing? Are we seeing reform delivered to industry that is affecting significant change and improvement? And the answer I have to that, which I know is incredibly unpopular to our friends inside of CASA, is that is not happening. Why do I say that? 7 years ago, we went to CASA and we said, the world has moved on with private pilot Part 67 medical certification. CASA needs to adopt the regulatory settings that the US and the UK have moved forward on. These settings would enable the aviation industry to take advantage of self-declaration medicals. It would increase participation. If we increase participation, we then end up increasing activity within the general aviation economy. If we increase activity in the general aviation economy, we are increasing the sustainability of general aviation as a long-term viable proposition. 7 years have come and 7 years have gone. And the best that CASA can say to us is, we need to consult. We need to put this back through the ASAP. We need to put this back through a consultative review. CASA have lost sight that the Australian public, the taxpayer, pays the Director of Aviation Safety her $600,000 salary because she is supposed to be a key decision maker. The buck is supposed to stop with her. She is entrusted with awesome powers to effect regulation change and to direct that change to occur, but she is not doing that. We're in this information loop where we're going back in and asking for feedback, and then going back in and asking for more feedback, and then going in and asking for more feedback, but we're never getting to an outcome. And as I've said in previous broadcasts, we need outcomes. We need a decision. CASA does not need to invent the wheel. A staggering statistic that everyone should keep in mind. There are 36,000 pilots in Australia. There are 80-something thousand pilots now flying in the US on the reformed medical standards. There are more pilots flying on a reformed medical in the US than we even have pilots in Australia. And CASA and their medical fraternity are actually sitting back saying, "Oh, we need to understand the sample size." Are you guys kidding? Like, you guys can't be for real. What do you know? What do you know that the US doesn't know? And here's the thing. CASA have never put anything on the table to justify their decision not to take action. They just say to us, we need to know more. Well, we're stuck in this loop. So will we see change? The answer to that, Paul, is until you start to create the frameworks to increase participation, nothing else matters. If you don't start bringing more pilots into the system and you start creating more flying activity, there is no demand for apprentices in engineering. Until you don't increase the number of pilots and participation, there is no demand for more maintenance companies. Until you start bringing in pilots and participation, there's no demand for flight schools. We don't have all the problems that CASA are imagining. The problem we've got is a participation problem. There are too many barriers. We've got to start focusing on how do we get people in and started. And the way you start that is you break down these unnecessary barriers, and AVMED are an unnecessary barrier.
I don't know.
So
Can you guys hear me? So can you guys hear me? I don't know what's happened to my camera, so maybe I'll just have to bow out. I was just going to say, I think if nothing changes, then we'll see airports continually to marginalise and kick out general aviation users. There will be a consistent and continuous drift over to RAOs if they continue to be operating under exemptions. And the irony will be is that people will continue to point at RAOs and sports aviation saying, look, it's all thriving. Well, it's because it's exempt from the rules. Correct. It's exempt from most of the rules. So you've got this irony where the healthy and flourishing sector is healthy and flourishing because it's exempted from the regulatory requirements, most of the regulatory requirements.
Clinton, I refer to the far aim, right? I refer to the far aim. How is it Australia or CASA, which tell us that they're a world-leading aviation regulator, how is it that the regulations exist in the US for medical reform, the regulations exist for sport pilots, the regulations exist for recreational pilots, the regulations exist for light sport, the regulations exist for aircraft certification reform, it all exists. CASA doesn't need to invent any wheel. They don't need to go and study crap. They just need to go and pick up what the world's most complex, sophisticated, and most successful aviation regulator in the world has implemented, or they have to tell the Australian public and put in writing why they are refusing to do so and what they know that the Americans don't know about aviation safety. That's where I think we're at, because otherwise, I think they're perpetrating a massive lie on the Australian people. They're pretending that they know something when they don't know anything at all. And I think this is actually a very powerful and a very important moment in time for CASA. They've got to put up or roll over. They've been telling the government for decades that they know more than the world's most sophisticated and advanced and successful aviation economy. And all the while, CASA's industry metrics have been tanking into the toilet. Now it's time for CASA to explain to the government and the Australian people why it feels it knows more and what justifies them to continue delivering a system that is so broken that Australian enterprise has been driven out. We have no aircraft manufacturing of any substance left in this country. We have no aircraft component manufacturing left of any substance in this country. Our flight training industry is a shadow of its former self. Our maintenance industries are a shadow of their former self. Our private general aviation industry is the worst it's ever been in decades. It's time for CASA to come clean and to put it on the table and to explain to the entire country what it knows that the US doesn't know and why it's justified to continue to refuse to adopt rules that have created trillions of dollars worth of economic success for the Americans. And I think that's a pretty simple request, right? They've refused for 7 years on med reform. It's time to put it on the table, CASA. Explain to us, put it in writing, and explain to us why you're refusing to deliver these reforms and what you know that the Americans don't about the safety of those medicals. And the same needs to happen with instructors, our 61 licensing framework, our maintenance part licensing, the whole smash. We need to know why, because, you know, I've sat in front of the board chair of CASA with the DAS, and the board chair looked at me with nothing other than contempt and anger as to why I continue to tell the Australian public we should adopt the US rules and how we can make it work with what we've got. I hate to break the news to everybody at CASA. It's not working. It's not working. And none of you are going to be around in another 10 years' time to face the consequences of an annihilated aviation industry when we're all sitting around wondering why we are now a fraction of what we are. We've got to fix this now. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. So to answer Will Abigail, it is imperative that the other industry bodies and associations stand with AOPA and get on with forcing the introduction of the world's most successful rule set, because it's the entire future of our industry that's at risk. You don't have the former head of the FAA standing at an international conference saying countries outside of the US are now 10 to 15 years behind the Americans and will not get to share in the success of the modern general aviation economy unless they get their reforms on. That's a glowing indictment. I'd love Australia to be a world leader, but we're going to become a world leader by adopting the world's best possible framework. You don't go out in the world of car racing and win races by putting the slowest engine in your car. You're not going to go and win air racing by having the slowest aircraft in the fleet. How are we ever going to succeed by putting the worst possible regulatory foot forward as an aviation industry? I think it's common sense. I might be wrong. Plenty of people seem to think I'm wrong. Maybe I am.
Yes. Well, what we face is that so far as the general punters and the ministers, successive ministers, are concerned, is that, quote, Australia's enviable air safety record, unquote, is caused by CASA. See, that outcome is caused by CASA. Now that's what I call causation for Martians. But in any event, unless and until we can convince sufficient people that that's not correct, we're not going to have anybody doing anything to substantially change what CASA is doing.
Part of that problem, Clinton, is getting the right KPIs and measurements for CASA, though. See, CASA come out, produce an annual report and say, we're doing really well. You know, the number of registered aircraft have increased by 1.2%. Number of licensed maintenance people has increased by 1.8%. That's all garbage. We need to know what participation rates are. We need to know how many people are participating in aviation actively. How many maintenance engineers are actively using their license in the course of working in the industry? How many pilots are working in the industry? How many flight school approvals are active and working in the industry? Because, you know, if you look up AOCs, there's a plethora of AOC holders, yet they're not all being used. The participation is not there. And I think it was the Bureau of Statistics released their last statistical batch where it found that nearly half of Australia's general aviation fleet is no longer being flown, i.e. the participation rate has halved. Half of the industry are not participating. So we need some wholesale change and some honesty in the data that CASA are producing and presenting to industry. We need to know the factual account of the health and welfare of the industry, and we need to focus on just one thing. How do we get participation up? How do we increase participation in aviation. It should be the overarching guide for everything that CASA does. If we make this change, will it increase participation? No, don't do it. Next, we should be doing this from a very common sense perspective to get the net end result, which is an aviation industry that's back growing and cultivating and becoming healthier and more sustainable. Otherwise, I fear that we're heading in the wrong direction, and it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better if they do not change the way in which they're approaching these challenges. And again, here's the deal. Pip and the team, they've been saying, I'm wrong, Ben's wrong, Ben's wrong, Ben's wrong. Let's wait and see. What happens if you're wrong? If I'm wrong, nothing happens. But if CASA's wrong, the industry's destroyed, right? There's a lot at risk here. I would think that you only need to travel around Australia and use your own lying eyes and your own lying ears to see and to listen to what's actually happening to participation across the industry. COVID didn't do us any favours, but it can't be used as an excuse as to what was causing the decline the years before COVID, okay? So we've got to get back to this core argument of is the regulatory system fit for purpose? And if it's not, take the bold and necessary steps to bring about a system reform, not a part reform, a system reform that gives Australia the best possible opportunity. And that's just my humble opinion. I could be wrong. I don't know. Paul's like, I wish I hadn't asked that question.
No, I'm sitting here, to be honest with you, Ben, I'm just thinking for those who are watching and pilots and other people in the industry, I'm listening to you on my left this way and Clinton on my right, and we have two outstanding people with immense capabilities representing all of us, and I think there's no better reason to join up and support AOPA. If this last 10 minutes hasn't crystallised.
There's a comment that, Paul, there's just a comment on screen. It's worth noting. Paul Goard, Brumby Aircraft. Paul and his family have been involved in aircraft manufacturing in this country for a very long time, successfully sold an aircraft manufacturing division offshore, and worked very hard to get that up and going. And Paul's comment, I'm going to read this out because it's just so pertinent. I can assure you it's not cost effective to manufacture here. It is not from the lack of skill. So many meetings with different heads of CASA in the last 20 years have all gone by the wayside. They are a complete embarrassment as an organisation. It's sad, and I want to make this comment because people out there go, "Oh, Ben just loves kicking them in the guts." I actually don't. I actually really don't. Anyone who genuinely knows me knows I take no pleasure in having to talk about these issues. I would love nothing more than the opportunity tomorrow to be saying we're now based on the FAR system and we're going hell for leather and we're working with businesses and we just want to get things rocking and rolling. I want success for the aviation industry. The board wants success for the aviation industry. The industry wants success for the aviation industry. What is so difficult for CASA to understand that we're talking about the future of our businesses? This is our superannuation. This is our futures. These are our children's futures. This is the opportunity for future Australians to even be involved in aviation. This is what we're fighting for. We're not fighting for some pointless esoteric thing. This is a very substantive fight, a fight for the very future of aviation in this country. And I think that we've got everything to gain from having this fight, and CASA should be bringing us to the table. They should be involving AOPA and the other industry bodies and actually being a lot more consultative and genuinely consultative on issues, instead of fighting us and consistently telling us that they're right in the face of overwhelming evidence. Isn't it time for CASA to also sit there saying, we might have got a few things wrong here and we've got to get on with it? Like, for example, why is our flight instruction system so complicated as it is today? The part regulations controlling flight training schools, all the nonsense just doesn't exist under the US system. It doesn't exist. All the crap flight instructors have got to go through to stay current doesn't exist under the American system. 75% of all student pilots and pilots trained in the United States trained by independent flying instructors. A harmonised central regulatory system that drives an entire national aviation economy, and it works. And yet we're continuing in Australia to make up part regulation that's a mixture of EASA, FAA, New Zealand CAA, God forbid, South African aviation, civil aviation, and Australian, this hybrid crap we keep generating. And everyone's wondering why everything in Australia has got 1,000 exemptions written around it, because nothing works. The only way you get it to work is you've got to write 1 million exemptions to make the whole thing function. It's just, it doesn't make sense. The only people who win from this are CASA, because they've got a full-time job for eternity to keep peddling it. But it's not helping the industry. It's actually hurting us as an industry. So it shouldn't, people shouldn't see it as offensive that we're talking about these issues, but rather we've got to solve it. We need to solve it to unlock the industry, unlock participation, unlock sustainability, all these great things. So,
well, you're preaching to the converted, Ben, and I don't know what happened. My apologies. My camera froze. It must have got sick of looking at me.
Well, look, guys, we are at 1 hour 20, and I guess we did make a commitment. We wouldn't go too far into the 2 hour mark. So thank you guys for joining. We will be continuing this conversation throughout the year. Mark Seibin, new AOPA director, Mark Seibin, is joining us next week on Tuesday for an introduction to the members and for his particular views and opinions. I'll be looking forward to tuning in with that. We also have a very special announcement, which is coming out tomorrow or the day after, in relation to our membership renewal promotion. So I kind of alluded to it before. I can't tell you anything about it because it's all top secret, but wouldn't it be wonderful if you join AOPA and you receive tickets in a draw to win a brand new Cirrus valued at, I think the total prize pool between the aircraft, hangarage, fuel, flight instruction and everything else, like $3 million worth of prize draw. Wouldn't it be amazing, Paul, as the AOPA treasurer, all these people flooding into AOPA, taking up memberships and getting all these tickets and entries to win this aeroplane? It's going to be drawn in 4 months' time, but I'm not giving away any details because we're waiting for it to be signed off, and once it's signed off, we'll rock and roll. But what an enormous opportunity for AOPA members later this week. So Clinton McKenzie, thank you so much for joining us again. Paul Rushton, mate, thank you for joining AOPA and being part of this journey. And on behalf of the national membership, thank you for taking on the Treasury's role. It's a godforsaken role, to say the least. And we're in such great hands having you here to help us supercharge it. And to all of our viewers that have sat there listening to us for 1 hour and 22 minutes, thank you so much for tuning in. We do look forward to catching up with you all later in the week. And of course, as the program recommences out of next week, Clinton has been into me to say, Ben, this program will happen every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on the dot to get some consistency with it. It's a great recommendation, and we're going to do our best to make that happen. So thank you very much, guys. And I say this at the end of every broadcast. If you like the work that AOPA Australia does in fighting for you, aircraft owners, pilots, aviation businesses and participants in our aviation industry across Australia, we invite you to jump online to www.aopa.com.au, jump online and grab a membership. It's $159 to be a member, to support us crazy people out there advocating and talking about these critical issues.
And I second that, Ben. I second that.
Absolutely, fighting for you for a better aviation industry. Together we are incredibly strong, and I really do invite you all to be part of this amazing journey. 2023 is really going to rock and roll, and I hope that you'll be part of the association with us. So thank you so much, guys, and good night.